Morning. Thank you for staying for our Saturday speaker series. Today we have Robert Gannon. Bob Gannon is a reconnaissance Marine Vietnam veteran, and he struggled with PTSD, with nightmares and flashbacks for over 30 years until God performed a great miracle for him through the intercession of a Novena of Saint Therese. Bob also recognizes children who suffer from lack of love and hope that someday that they will too understand that they can fight back for recovery. So he wrote his memoirs, or documented his story, in a book called Never Give Up, which I see is standing here. And he was also a speaker at the 2020 St. Louis Marian Conference. So this morning we are glad to have Mr. Robert Gannon. Thank you.
Hey, good morning. I have several talks that I give, and on the right it may be a little confusing. One of my talks is when I came home with a serious case of post-traumatic stress I struggled with for many years, and I was on the verge of suicide. And I prayed a Novena to Saint Therese, and performed a great miracle in my life. The other one of my talks is seeing Jesus on the battlefield through the hearts of the men I served with. And that's a story about, you hear soldiers come back, they talk about camaraderie and their closeness. And really what it is when we have nothing, and we have to rely on each other every day for our own lives. It's a story about the heroics and the self-sacrifice and how everything is shared. But today I'm going to talk about how God's guided my life. There's many times in our life that we go through major tragedies and we don't think God is there. But this is a story of all the tragedies I went to and how God was there each time, and He guided me to where I am today. Today, as I tell my story about the difficult road that God has made me travel, and my anger at God, I always let everybody gets in. And my anger at God for much of my life becomes a road of humiliation, despair, and hopelessness. But God needed me to go through these times so I could serve in the streets and the missions and the jails and the prisons. Maybe my story will help some of you understand the reason why you may be facing or have faced many difficulties and challenges in your life. My story is about a young boy that grew up in a dysfunctional home, an abusive and alcoholic father, and a mother who gave up and became angry and even turned on me. I also struggled with a serious learning disability, dyslexia. I was also left-handed, and the school didn't believe that anyone should be left-handed, and they wouldn't let me write with my left hand. They tried to switch me to my right hand. They would smack my left hand with a ruler when I tried to write with my left hand. For the past 30 years, I worked in the inner cities, jails, prisons, and Victory Mission, and a 12-step program called Celebrate Recovery. You may be asking yourself, why has he dedicated his life to working with the alcoholic, the drug addict, and the less fortunate? I do so because I know what it feels like to have no hope. No hope of a proud and productive life. No hope of being smart enough to go to college or ever having a good job. No hope that you'll ever be respected. No hope that you'll ever have any confidence in yourself to achieve an abundant life. To grow up thinking that God doesn't love me. If He did, why didn't He give me the same chance as others? I grew up very angry at God and wondering why I didn't grow up in a nice home with loving parents, why I'm not smart. If God did love me, if God didn't love me, why should I love Him? What happened to me as a child affected my spiritual relationship and trusting God until late into my adulthood. Having dyslexia, can everybody hear me okay? Can you hear me back there? All right. Having dyslexia can be very humiliating and degrading when you can't spell and always flunking the spelling test and embarrassment of being the first one to miss a spelled word and a spelling bee, the first one always to sit down, trying to write something on the blackboard in front of the class, any type of classroom report. And even when they would have me stand up and read something from a book, I'd be stumbling over the words, and the teacher always had to help me pronounce the words. When you got problems such as these, you're going to be made fun of or picked on by other students. And you better learn to fight, or you'll be bullied. I can't put into words the amount of humiliation I faced every day in school. Even later in life, I had a hard time spelling. A large part of our world is writing and spelling. And it makes it hard to take notes in a meeting and difficult to write a report. Many schools today still don't understand or recognize someone with a learning disability. Little did I know that God had a plan for my life. Jeremiah 1:5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart, and I appointed you a prophet to all nations." Like I said, I was one of those people who was deeply hurt as a child and thought God didn't care about me. If he did care about me, why'd he let me grow up in a dysfunctional home and an alcoholic and abusive father? I don't ever remember my mom giving me a hug or telling me she loved me. The only time I can remember her showing any emotion for me is when my dad came home drunk, and for some reason he beat me with a good-sized stick and put welts down my back and legs, and some of the welts were bleeding. After the beating, my mom was wiping the blood from the back of my legs, and I saw some tears running down her face. I remember thinking, maybe she does care about me. Her life was very tough, living with an abusive alcoholic, working in factories just to put food on the table for 5 kids. Like I said earlier, when I started the first grade, I had trouble reading and spelling. They didn't know about dyslexia. Kids like me were just considered dumb. In fact, the teacher told my mom in front of me that I'd never amount to much. She said I probably wouldn't be much more than a ditch digger. I'll tell you, 70 years later, those words still ring in my ears. And I wonder how many children's hopes have been destroyed by similar words. I believe I was in the 1st or 2nd grade when this incident happened. And I remember how hurt I was, thinking, why didn't God give me the same opportunity as others? I remember asking myself, why don't God like me? What's wrong with me? Why would he let all this happen to me? I gave up trying to learn in school when I heard what the teacher told my mom. My parents gave up any hope I'd ever amount to anything, and they constantly called me names like, "You're a dumbbell, stupid." And they would tell me almost every day, "You're never going to amount to anything in life." The teachers were just as bad. They would set me in back of the classroom with a dunce hat on my head. I can't remember the reason why, but I do remember the humiliation. I hated going to school. Like I said earlier, I was left-handed, and they didn't believe anybody should be left-handed, and they tried to make me write with my right hand. As you listen to the rest of my testimony, you will see how God was always in control of my life. He kept putting people or circumstances in my life that kept pushing me out of the hopeless hole that the teachers and the parents had dug for me. I grew up in a small Catholic town of less than 100 people. It was 9 miles of gravel road just to get to the highway. The grade school was a 2-room schoolhouse. The 1st to the 4th was in 1 room, and the 5th to the 8th was in the 2nd room. It was a public school. It was a really German Catholic town. We went to Catholic Mass every morning before school and after Mass we had catechism. In the wintertime, if you were in the 5th to the 8th grade and lived within a mile of the school, you had to take turns coming in, building fires in the wood stoves in both rooms before school started. High school was just as bad as a 2-room schoolhouse. I was put in a special education room. The room was called by the rest of the students in the high school the dummy room. There was about 20 of us in the dummy room, and the school didn't think there was much hope for us, so they didn't put much effort into educating us. You know, when the school puts a label on you as a dummy, you're going to be made fun of by some of the students. Today they call it bullying. I had already developed an anger issue by the time I got to high school, and if you're going to make fun of me, you had better be ready to fight. So I didn't have any trouble being bullied. I was doing hard work as a boy. I was strong. I worked on farms, hauling hay, worked in the woods, cutting cordwood with an axe and a one-man crosscut saw. At 14 years of age, I became the grave digger of our small town, and I dug the graves by hand. I got a job working in a charcoal kiln in the summer, and when school started, I started working on Saturdays, and I was making $7 a day. My parents were going to let me quit school and work full-time in that kiln. You know, it's charcoal they use for briquettes, and I think it's used for barbecuing and medical. I don't know, it had many uses. The day before I was to quit school, someone turned me in for not being 16 years of age. There was 2 of us working in that kiln, and some days the job required we load 30 or 40 cord of wood in a kiln. That would be a rack of wood 4 foot high, 4 foot wide, and 280 foot long. The hard work on my young body would have broke it down and caused it to break down at a young age. The charcoal kiln was 8 miles from home. I didn't have a car, so if my parents could pick me up, I walked the 8 miles to home. And I always gave all my money to my mom to help with family needs. The high school did give all of us dummies a diploma. That was good. And I decided to join the Navy. So I traveled to Jeff City to join the Navy, but the Navy recruiter was out to lunch. And the Marine recruiter's office was just next door. I went in the Marine recruiter's office to wait for the Navy recruiter to get back from lunch. On May 16, 1960, I left for a Marine Corps boot camp. I planned to make it a career. I didn't think I'd ever make any rank. I was so dumb. But at least I would have somewhat of a home, someone where I belonged, and a career I could be proud of. Like I said, as I look back on my life, I can see God guiding my life through those hard times as a child. I built up mental toughness and determination that not many people have. I made it through boot camp, and I was hoping the Marines would send me to a school, but it was not to be. I was assigned to the 4th Marines in Hawaii, an infantry battalion. I was assigned to an infantry company, and my weapon was a Browning automatic rifle. It weighed 20 pounds. And I also had to carry 13 magazines, and each magazine loaded with ammo was another pound. So I had a total of 33 pounds plus my pack. And I remember thinking, here I go again, God. You're seeing I don't get a break. I'm assigned to one of the heaviest weapons in the squad. But I was there about 3 months when the Marine Corps decided to form a special squad and put on demonstrations for dignitaries from the U.S. and foreign countries. Out of the 1,500 Marines stationed there, 13 were selected on that special squad. I was one of those Marines selected. When I was issued that BAR, I didn't realize I had a special talent for using that weapon. And I put on quite a show at the demonstrations. And I received a lot of recognition, and I was promoted to Lance Corporal. When I joined the Marines, I didn't think I'd make much rank because I was so dumb, but I was wrong. Shortly after being promoted to Lance Corporal, I made squad leader, and a short time later, I was promoted to Corporal. and I made corporal in less than 2 years. The normal time in 1962 was from 3 to 4. My next duty station was Subic Bay, Philippines, where I worked in a guard company, guarding ammo bunkers located in the jungles. And I also served for a short period of time on the Armed Forces Police. Our work schedule was 8 hours on, and we worked 8-hour shifts on duty, 24 hours on and 24 hours off. On my days off, I start swimming in the marine pool. I always loved to do distance, whether swimming, running, or cycling, and I would swim from 70 to 100 laps in that pool every other day. And I was asked to try out for the Marine swim team. I made the team swimming the 400, and I won the inter-service championship swimming the 400. And I was also the training NCO, and I gave and graded the Marine Infantry Tactics and Weapons annual test. So I knew most of the answers, and I scored a 98 on the test. And I was promoted to sergeant in less than 4 years. I was promoted to sergeant in less than 4 years, which was really good in those days. And I was transferred to Subic Bay. I was transferred from Subic Bay to Camp Pendleton, California. Because of swimming on the Marine team in the Philippines on my test scores, I was selected to join Charlie Company 1st Recon. I was really shocked when I was selected to go to the recon training. I knew they only picked the very best Marines to attend recon school. Less than 1% of the Marines are selected to go through recon training, and almost 50% of those don't make it through the tough training and schooling. I can best describe it as a 3-month nightmare. Going through recon school was my greatest and hardest accomplishment ever in life. The mental and physical pain at times total exhaustion is almost indescribable. I remember once while running up and down those California mountains, I became so tired and exhausted, I began actually losing feeling in my lower body. I didn't even have enough strength to raise my arms above my waist. If you quit, you'd be dropped from the course. And I began setting little goals, like if I can just make it to that tree. And then another goal, if I can just make it to that rock. That's how I got through most of the training. Once I completed my recon training, I was changed. I was a changed person. My confidence and belief in myself was just starting to grow. Can you see how God was pulling me out of that hopeless hole that the teachers and my parents had dug for me? Now, by Marine standards, I was considered the elite of the elite. Can you see how the hardships of my childhood prepared me for this? I was assigned to Charlie Company, 3rd Platoon, where I met the man who would change my life. His name was Staff Sergeant Huff. Huff was a Korean War veteran, had seen some very intense fighting in Korea. In the next few months, Sergeant Huff and I became good friends. But that friendship between Sergeant Huff and I was to change when we got our orders to go to Vietnam. Before we departed the States, we spent 30 days of very intense training, and Sergeant Huff's personality changed from being a nice guy to what it seemed like a raging tyrant. He had the task of trying to get a young platoon of inexperienced recon Marines ready to go to war. I was a sergeant, and that meant I was next in line to take over a platoon if something happened to Sergeant Huff. A lot of his rage was directed personally towards me. He was down my throat to speak of day and night, no letting up, trying to pound as much knowledge in my head as he could. I felt humiliated and confused. I remember I was unsure of how to handle the situation. I had never been in a situation like this where somebody was just constantly on me, constantly questioning me, constantly pushing me with knowledge. I felt humiliated. I had very little recon experience or leadership skills necessary to be in position of a platoon sergeant, much less an elite recon platoon. A recon platoon is that we work behind enemy lines. And in Vietnam, we operated anywhere from 5 to 40 miles in enemy-controlled territory. Recon's the eyes and ears of an infantry regiment, and the information we gather is helpful to their survival and mission. I was hoping that when we got to Vietnam, Sergeant Huff would ease up on me, but it only got worse. He was continually asking me, saying, "Where would you do in this situation, in this instance? Where are you now?" Referring to where we are on a map. When you operate behind enemy lines, the jungle sometimes is so thick that you can't even see any reference points, so keeping track of where you are on the map in case you get hit by the enemy or the enemy finds you. We operate in 4-man teams, and so we really didn't have much chance of survival if you made a mistake. So he constantly interrogated me on other survivals I needed to know. I began to hate Sergeant Huff, and I even thought about quitting recon because he was on me so hard and transferring to the infantry. After 3 months in Vietnam, Sergeant Huff was seriously wounded. Some days I get through this pretty good, some days I don't. He was seriously wounded and was evacuated to a hospital in Japan. The next day, the company commander, my glasses fogged up. There we go. The next day, the company commander called me in and informed me they were making me the platoon sergeant of 3rd Platoon. And I felt a great weight of responsibility. I was 24 years old at the time. And at that moment, I understood why Sergeant Huff became who he did when we got our orders to go to Vietnam. I realized that Sergeant Huff's responsibility was preparing me for the task and the huge responsibility of being a platoon sergeant of a recon platoon. I now know his heart was a lot like Jesus. Sometimes his language wasn't. Giving most of his life to his country and his men, and dedicating to get as many of us home as possible. I led almost 25 recon missions behind enemy lines after being made platoon sergeant, and I was awarded the Navy Commendation Medal for leadership. When they called me in and they told me they was going to make me platoon sergeant, I was totally shocked. Even though I had accomplished the goal of being an elite recon Marine, and now being promoted to platoon sergeant at the young age of 24. Most platoon sergeants were at least 27 to 30 years old before they had enough experience. As I stood there pondering on how many missions I had been with on Sergeant Huff, on planning mission also, but I began to realize too that not too many years ago, a teacher told my mom I'd never amount to much besides a ditch digger. I spent my years in high school and special ed, never having any confidence I could ever achieve much in life. And now I stand here. They were trusting me and help planning vital recon missions, not only finding the enemy, but also his supply routes, the vital information that was vital to the battalion, vital to their battle plans, vital to their safety, finding the enemy and stopping him before he could launch an attack, or the information they had needed to attack the enemy. In my first mission, I was sitting there with some high-ranking officers, and I could see them looking at me like, wow, man, this guy must be something, you know? They would look at me with all that respect. As they were telling me the mission and the information I needed to obtain for them, I was to find a regiment of Viet Cong they thought was preparing to launch an attack on the base. This is going to be a very, very dangerous mission. As I was sitting there looking at them and they were looking at me with all that respect. I'm thinking, if they only knew how dumb I really am. The damage that was done by my parents, the school system, that damage, all I had achieved, all I had accomplished, that damage was still the overriding factor in my personality, and I still felt dumb. It's amazing the lasting effect that can be done to a young child's mind at a young age. I'll never forget the first mission I was to lead. Like I say, it's going to be an extremely dangerous mission. There was a possibility of a regiment of Viet Cong that would gather in this valley to launch an attack. And they were sending us in to find them. We knew the mission was going to be extremely, extremely dangerous. A Viet Cong force of this size would have their own patrols patrolling their perimeters. It was for us to get inside that perimeter and try to get information that the headquarters wanted. We were dropped in by helicopter. We made our way to a valley where they thought the Viet Cong were occupying. We couldn't see over the trees in the valley, so I had one of the men climb a tree to see if he could see down in the valley and see if there was any activity going on. He got about halfway up the tree, and we heard a Viet Cong patrol talking. They were coming up the hill right where we were, and I motioned for him to come down. He started down the tree, and he stepped on a branch that broke, and he fell. And he hit another branch right below it, and he let out a big groan. Oh! The Viet Cong started talking. They heard him. We knew they knew we were on top of that hill because they had probably received information that a helicopter had dropped in a recon team. I've been pushed so hard by Sergeant Huff on the details, I had already planned all my artillery concentrations of exactly where we were. Normally, if you don't have pre-planned artillery concentrations, you have to call in the coordinates, which takes time, takes a lot of time. But with the pre-planned artillery concentrations, you have a number assigned to them. So when you call in to artillery, you just give them a number like Echo X-ray 272, 273. They already have the number of them concentration points, and so they can just start firing immediately. So the Viet Cong were coming up the hill at us, and I told them to fire 2 volleys. The rounds fell short and were hitting all around us. Dirt was flying, trees were being hit. I remember one artillery round hit a tree just left of me, about halfway up, about 20 or 30 feet off the ground. The tree exploded, bark was flying all over the place. Shells were hitting around us so close, concussions from the artillery rounds felt like needles driving through our ears. We were all hugging the ground as close as we could to keep from getting hit by shrapnel. It's a miracle. It's a miracle that nobody was hit or killed. After the second volley, we got up and started our run. We knew the Viet Cong were probably waiting to see if there was going to be a third volley before they got up. It would give us a little bit of a head start. We knew the Viet Cong would be waiting for us at the landing zone that we were dropped off at. I had already in my plan for emergency landing zone. And I told the radio man, tell headquarters, we're on the run, and we're heading for LZ3. Have the helicopters pick us up there. We started down the trail, and we knew the Viet Cong were pretty close behind us. But I also had pre-planned concentration, artillery concentrations on the trail. As we passed the first point, I had memorized the terrain on my map so well, I didn't need to look at my map. And I remember the concentration point to this day because we knew the Viet Cong were just behind us. And I yelled to the radio man, tell them to fire Echo X-ray 273. And within minutes, shells began falling behind us on the trail, blocking the Viet Cong and giving us some more lead time. I'll tell you, I'll never forget that concentration number. I think I'm probably going to have it just embedded on my casket. I'd planned 2 or 3 more concentration number on the trail. We got word by radio that they were sending in 2 helicopters to pick us up by 2 fighter jets. We got to the pickup point. We heard on the radio that one of the helicopters was having trouble. We heard the choppers approaching. We threw our smoke grenade, which signals them where to pick us up at. The first chopper came in, and I loaded some of the men on the first chopper, and the rest of the men and I was to get on the second chopper. As we tried in the chopper, the pilot was revving the engine, but the chopper just sat there. It wouldn't pick up off the ground. He kept revving the engine, and nothing would happen. Everybody was nervous. We're all on one side looking out the window with our rifles, knowing the Viet Cong were going to be coming out of the jungle any minute, and we were going to be setting targets in that chopper. The crew chief was yelling at the pilot, "Get this thing off the ground. Get this thing off the ground." We're on top of a hill, and the pilot panicked, and he started taxiing that chopper down the hill. I don't know what kept it from turning over. The chopper was flopping to the right and then to the left. It almost turned over several times. It threw us out of our seats. We were all on the floor, hanging on to the supports that hold the seats up to keep from being thrown out the door. And he finally got it off the ground. We almost crash landed several times before we got back to base. I got a lot of recognition for that mission, but Sergeant Huff's the man who I am so grateful for. He's really the one that saves our lives that day. And a short time later, I was promoted to staff sergeant. I remember my first fitness report, my second tour in Vietnam as a platoon sergeant. My company commander, commandant now and how Staff Sergeant Gannon, had taken a platoon of young, inexperienced Marines and turned them into a hardcore fighting unit in a short period of time. What Sergeant Huff taught me was to be a leader. You become a servant, always putting your men's needs before your own. God sent Sergeant Huff into my life as a potter. He formed me into a competent and proficient platoon sergeant and taught me the leadership skills I would need later in life. Isaiah 64:8 says, "O Lord, you are our Father, we are the clay. You are the potter, and we are all the work of your hands." About 10 years after I was discharged from the Marines, I made contact with Sergeant Huff. He had retired and was selling insurance in Oceanside, California. And we talked about meeting somewhere between Missouri and California and spending some time together in a month or so. I don't remember the date, but I'll never forget the time. It wasn't long after we spoke. I woke up at 2:30 in the morning, and something told me he just died. And I've never heard him. I never heard from him again. His name is not written in any history books, but I'll tell you, it's etched in the hearts of all those who served in his platoon. I was sent back to Vietnam around November 1968, again as a platoon sergeant of the 3rd Platoon. I lasted only 4 or 5 months before I was injured and sent to the Naval Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. In August of 1969, 9.5 years of service in the Marine Corps, I received a medical discharge because of my injury. I was mentally devastated. The Marine Corps was my life. For the first time in my life, I had excelled. I was respected. I was proud of who I was. I had achieved being an elite recon Marine. I made staff sergeant in less than 6 years. That was in the top 1% of the Marine Corps. And I had enough time and grade that I would be eligible for another promotion in a few months. And I remember saying, "God, what have you against me? What have you against me?" Sure, I may have died in Vietnam if I wasn't injured, but I tell you, I'd rather die young with dignity than live a life to an old age without purpose or wonder why I was even born. I still thought I was dumb, but I was determined to go to college. I thought I'll flunk a lot of courses, but I'll just keep on retaking them until I pass. And I decided on taking electronics at Lynn Technical College in Lynn, Missouri. And my parents, they said, I don't know why you're taking electronics. You're too dumb. That I should take something easier. I took the entrance exam and I flunked it big time. I only scored at a 6th grade level. The personnel in Tech saw something in me and they let me take the electronic course. I can see God's hand guiding the staff at Lynn Tech, giving me a chance with such low test scores. I know now that God had something good in store for me. I don't believe He intended me to live a life of painful drudgery. He gave me a chance. He gave me a chance, and now it's up to me. If you wake up every day filled with apathy or dread or boredom, you're probably not doing what God's planned for you. God has created you uniquely and has good things planned for our lives. I always sign my book, Chase the Dream That God's Placed in Your Heart and Never Give Up. The challenge I've faced seemed impossible of graduating from Lynn Tech is now a story of inspiration to my family and others, especially those with learning disabilities and people that don't think they can ever achieve much in life. The difficulties in your life can be an inspiration to others. You see, failure can be a very positive aspect of our life. Every time we fail and pick ourselves up and continue the journey, we're a little wiser, more confident. Never allow quitting to be an option in your life. And that's why I titled my book, Never Give Up. When I was discharged from the Marines, I had $600 to my name. I used most of it to purchase a chainsaw in a 1952 2.5-ton truck and doing the only trade I knew, cutting cordwood for a living. I rented an old farmhouse for $45 a month, and I worked out the rent working on the farm. The farmhouse was a total wreck. It was full of rats and mice. My family of 4, we all slept in one room for safety because we could hear the rats and mice running across the ceiling at night. We always had to wash all the dishes before we ate because the mice were also using them too. We lived in that farmhouse for about 4 months before I got my military schooling, benefits of $125 a month, and we moved into a trailer, which was quite a bit better. The old truck was really beat up. The window on the driver's side was gone. There was no heater or air conditioner. There was holes in the floorboard. I could see the road beneath me as I was traveling down the road. No matter how cold it was, after cutting and splitting 3/4 wood on that truck, I'd be sweating. Since I had no heat, I carried 5 blankets with me. And as I started down the road and started cooling off, I started wrapping those blankets around me to stay warm. I didn't have a window on the driver's side. I had a piece of cardboard that I would hold up to the window to try to block some of the cold there in the wintertime. When I had to make a left turn, I had to take the cardboard down. The first year was really hard with only a 6th grade level education. I was so far behind everyone. I had to take Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and trigonometry. In my second year, I had to take physics, analytic geometry, and calculus. But there was always someone there to help tutor me, or a study group in my electronic class to help me. The first year was really rough, but I didn't flunk any courses. I pulled some C's. My grades started improving my second year, and I made the honor roll once. My mom had a hard time believing that. I took a 3rd-year computer course called Computer Maintenance and made grade high enough once to make the dean's list. Those were some tough times. I lived on about $4,000 a year, and never again would I ever let anybody limit my dreams or call me dumb. About 10 years after I graduated from Lynn Tech, they start doing a story once a year on a student that had either excelled in his career or inspired others while attending Lynn Tech. Of the many thousands of students that had graduated, I was the second student they chose to do a story on. Can you see now how God has been guiding my life? Can you see how God has prepared me for this part of my life? The recon training changed me. I was no longer afraid to fail. Quitting was no longer in my vocabulary. I knew I was going to graduate no matter what I had to face. You see, God puts dreams in our hearts and writes destiny over our lives. And if we trust Him enough to take Him at His word, we'll find ourselves on a journey to a fulfillment of that dream. Unfortunately, that path that takes us to the promise is fraught with thickets and thorns. Nothing worth having ever comes easy without opposition. Storms will come, lions will roar, our fears will be confronted. God allows the path to be difficult because refining us and preparing us for our place of promise. He is intent on extracting our fears, insecurities, our past lives, which the enemy would love to leverage against us. The night I got on that stage and got my diploma, there was no one prouder, not even the valedictorian. I could not have been prouder if I hadn't survived the tremendous scholastic and physical and financial challenge along the way. I could never have felt that pride if I hadn't gone through the fire to earn my 2 degrees. I got a job on a pipeline as an electromechanical technician and had a very successful career. I retired after 33 years of service. It was a pipeline I realized I wasn't done. I excelled in many different areas of pipeline work. I designed field machining tools, hydraulic systems. I taught classes on pump repair, sealing technology, just to mention a few of my accomplishments. I still do some subcontracting for them. I oversee some inspection work, oversee contracting crews, working for the pipeline to help them on their preventive maintenance program on cross-country block valves. I still have a hard time spelling, but now I got a phone that knows how to spell. Just because we're deficient in some areas, as I am in spelling, God has gifted me in other areas. I don't have time to list all my accomplishments in my 33 years, but they are many. One regret I have, I would like to send a book to that teacher that said I wouldn't amount to much in life. I want to encourage everyone here that's not done well in school. That's definitely not a sign you're dumb or that you're not intelligent. God has put a dream in everyone's heart, and I encourage you to chase that dream. Chase it with vigor and never give up. I'm 78 years old, and I just completed my first book. At 73 years old, I started my speaking career. I don't know what God has planned for me next, but I'm excited. It's the hardships of my childhood, the struggles from the war that have shaped my life and has given me the compassion to serve others. It's not the easy times of my life that my friends and family respect me for. It's the times I've gone through the major struggles. I've fought the many demons caused by my childhood, my dyslexia, and a serious case of post-traumatic stress. A friend wrote after reading my book, "I was humbled to discover all that you went through, the pure grit, determination to battle through the PTSD, to rise like a phoenix from your battles with all the personal demons you had to face." Again, I encourage you here, no matter what has happened to you in the past or what you're facing today, turn it around. Use it to help others. When our time comes to stand before Jesus and we witness His still bruised, beaten, and crucified body for our salvation, let us also stand with souls that have been scarred and beaten through the trials and hardships of all the demons that we had to face. But it's in these times that our faith has grown stronger through prayer, relying on God for the strength to fight these demons. These are the times that allow us to become living examples for others. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gannon, for a very inspirational story and a good reminder that we affect the people around us. So we need to be conscious of that. So thank you for coming today, and I hope to see you first Saturday for our next speaker series. Good afternoon.